Okay, so the last PowerPoint that we covered in this unit dealt with social psychology, but it specifically dealt with attribution, whether it's internal or external, whether it's stable or unstable, and also conformity, compliance, and obedience within the realm of social psychology, as well as discrimination, prejudice, racism, all of that. So now we're going to move into group behavior, specifically altruism and attraction. So we're going to cover parts of social psychology that explain why certain people get married or why certain people attract other kinds of people specific to social psychology. So topics covered. What makes you attracted to others? What are the cultural standards for physical attractiveness and the different types of love? So first up, for attraction, you should remember the primacy effect. Now, we've covered the primacy effect before in learning, where you're more likely to remember the beginning of a list rather than the middle of a list. That's in response to learning styles. But if you're looking at social psychology, then it's talking about the first impression that you get when you meet somebody. So yes, first impressions do matter. It is very difficult to shake a negative first impression of somebody. When it comes to laws of attraction or factors in attraction, we're going to talk about 5 different terms that you should be familiar with. The first one is the mere exposure effect. Now, we've discussed this previously. Another term for this is the proximity effect. Robert Zajonc, hope that's how you pronounce it, he came up with the theory that the more you're around somebody, that familiarity breeds attraction. So the more you're exposed to something, the more fondly you feel about that something. So like, for instance, people may look at Benedict Cumberbatch and you think, no, not cute. But then eventually, if you keep seeing him in movies or on the Sherlock Holmes episodes, eventually that familiarity and that repetition will be comfortable for you, and that could lead to attraction. How many of you have ever had a crush on somebody who, or you don't have to answer this literally, who is in most of your classes? You're more likely, since you're more exposed to that person, to develop an attraction to them just simply by being around them. So that's what the mere exposure effect is, or the proximity effect. That's part of the reason why long distance relationships have this stereotype of not being successful, because you lack that mere exposure effect. You lack the proximity of it. Another theory under the factors of attraction is reciprocal liking. What does reciprocal mean? If you reciprocate something, what does that mean? To return something. So you are more likely to like somebody who likes you. So if they like you, then you're more likely to like them. Why do we have this factor of reciprocity? Because it boosts our self-esteem. It's nice to be wanted. We don't like uncertainty. We like stability. So if we know somebody likes us, then we're more likely to like them back because there's a certain level of certainty in it. It's kind of like if someone says, I've seen this on Twitter before, it's like, what if we kissed? Ha ha ha, just joking, unless. Okay, so you want to feel out those vibes and see if they're equivalent to yours. A similarity is also a factor, which goes against like the common saying that opposites attract. That's actually not psychologically accurate. In reality, the more similar a person is to you, the more likely you are to be attracted to them. Birds of the feather do flock together. That's because similarity breeds contentment because it's a type of stability. It's a type of familiarity. And also, if you're with somebody who validates your beliefs, that can also validate your self-esteem. So people with the same views on marriage or the same views on political affiliation or the same views on religion are more likely to be content because of that similarity, as opposed to if you have a number of differences that would result in conflict or confrontation. Yeah, kind of like 2 peas in a pod. This is one thing that people often get mistaken when it comes to attraction, where they think, oh, opposites attract. Actually, it's more likely that similarity attracts. Liking through association. You can have classical conditioning. Is classical conditioning voluntary or involuntary? It's involuntary. Operant conditioning is voluntary. So with this, let's say that you love football. You intrinsically enjoy watching football. Well, one of the anchors, one of the presenters, I don't know what they're called, for those football games is on every time you watch your particular team. So you start associating that anchor with your football team, which means you get good feelings whenever you see them. You have conditioned yourself to associate the anchor with your favorite team. Now, are you consciously doing that? No. You are unconsciously doing it. It is involuntary. It's kind of like, I think there was someone on TikTok that was trying to classically condition their boyfriend where they're like, oh, every time I see him, I give him a chicken nugget or something. So now he associates me with chicken nuggets and he loves chicken nuggets. So that means he must love me. It's like, that, yes, I saw that. Yeah, which is insane. But yeah, for those of you who couldn't hear, because that was the one I was thinking of. I knew that there was one that was crazy and I was like, what was it? All right, so this woman on his like crazy confessions on TikTok, she was like, yeah, every time my boyfriend goes to sleep, I put a nicotine patch on him, and then before he wakes up, I take it off. So he starts craving nicotine and thinking that he's craving me because he's only satisfied when I'm around when he's sleeping. And it's like, okay, that's hella manipulative. So don't do that. Please don't get your significant other addicted to a substance in order to make them fall in love with you. Although I guess in fairy tales, there are love potions. So maybe that's how it relates. Okay, so yes, liking through association with something works. People are getting way too comfortable on that platform. Yeah, it's like, how are you snitching on yourself? Like back in my day, like we wouldn't post when we did potential crimes. But nowadays, it's like live stream, like and subscribe. All right, the pairing game, in general, as social creatures, humans tend to reach towards finding partners. So when we interact with others, we try to determine whether their intelligence, their interests, their attractiveness compares to ourselves. So we tend to seek out partners with similar attractiveness levels as us. Although sometimes, have you ever seen a couple where you're just like, man, he must be like funny or something because she's like super cute and he's just kind of So you're like, there must be something else making up for the, unless you're, I guess if you're not, shallow. So we have this pairing game where we try to find somebody who's similar to us. So going back to that idea of similarity, birds of a feather, we want to make sure that if we're a 6, we're with a 6 or higher. If we're a 7, then we want a 7 or higher. Just kind of makes sense. Although, I don't know, I think Beyonce, that's just not fair. Like, if a scale from 1 to 10, like she'd have to be above a 10. And like Jay-Z's okay, but Michael B. Jordan, yeah. When it comes to biology, how do we even get on that topic? It's like, when it comes to biology, we also, like animals, have pheromones playing a role. So how do pheromones work? Well, remember the parts of the brain. You have the hypothalamus that controls our endocrine system, our hormones. We have an olfactory tract and olfactory nerves. Remember that the pheromones go on the air and they go into our nose, hit our olfactory bulb, and that's going to send a message to our hypothalamus saying, hey, what's up? How you spell your number, girl? All right, so our bodies naturally secrete these fluids through glands in our body. That just sounds so gross. Our glands that contain natural pheromones. So think like your underarms. Okay, that would express those pheromones. Then your nose, that's what vomeronasal organ, nose, detects the pheromones and then sends a signal to the olfactory nerves. Those olfactory nerves send that message to the hypothalamus, and that triggers emotions. That can trigger emotions of attraction, sexual desire, arousal, any of those things. Now, with animals, that's pretty evident. Okay, like yesterday, man, okay, I was driving home. I'm in my neighborhood, and I pull in, and like before I even get to my house, I see my roommate's dog. He's just hanging out in someone's yard. That's the 3rd time he's escaped this week. And so I go up and I thank the neighbor. I'm like, hey, what has been bothering you? He's like, yeah, no, he's trying to get to my girl dog because she's in heat. He's trying to dig under the fence. And I'm like, well, our dog's fixed. I don't know what he's trying to do here because whatever. But that is how it works with animals. And to some extent, we have that with humans as well. One thing about smell with your partners is if you're attracted to a partner based on their natural pheromones, then that means that y'all are genetically diverse, meaning genetically different from the other. Because if you have too much similarity in genetics, obviously, evolutionarily, that is not going to benefit your species. So if you have somebody that you smell and you're just like, no, not attractive, then that means y'all are too much alike in your genetic code. So evolutionarily, your body is telling you, hey, don't have children with them because they're too similar. You want somebody who will diversify your genetic code for the continuation of the species, because that will make you less susceptible to disease and other factors within the environment, species-wide, not individual-wide. All right, when it comes to attractiveness, physical attractiveness does play a role in the frequency of dating. People who are more attractive tend to date more, and this is in both men and in women. With this, however, we have a cognitive bias that emerges, known as the halo effect, not the video game, or the physical attractiveness stereotype. Y'all have taken AP Lit and AP Lang, right? Or you're in it now? Some of you are like, what's that? So if you've ever read a book or a story where the bad guy, the villain, has something physically wrong with him, like he's described as ugly, or maybe he has a messed up back or a broken arm. I think, was it King Richard in one of Shakespeare's plays? That's a common theme in literature, is that they try to indicate who is the villain in the story by showing them as somehow deformed or unattractive. Okay, so like if you're thinking The Lion King, Scar has a scar on him. He's skinny and lanky. Okay, that's supposed to indicate that he is the villain. So because of that, that ties into an actual psychological theory, the theory that we view attractive people as healthier, happier, more honest, and more successful. Now, is that accurate? No. But pretty people do have a amount of privilege to an extent because of this halo effect. Because they're pretty, people assume they're smarter than they are, or they're more successful than they are, or they're more honest than they actually are. People tend to be nicer to them because of that. Okay, so that is a cognitive bias. Now, when it comes to physical attractiveness, that's going to vary by culture and among people. Different cultures are going to have different standards or beauty standards that they try to live up to. Okay, so for instance, in the country of Mauritania, obesity is revered, meaning it is respected, it is desirable. So young girls are sometimes force-fed to obtain a weight that the government has described as life-threatening. Whereas in America, we have the opposite end of the spectrum, where you'll have body shaming of people or fat phobia against people who are perceived as overweight. And we have a lot of our social media pointing towards losing weight or different methods to lose weight. So you can have different beauty standards depending on the culture and the time period. If any of y'all have looked at Renaissance paintings, well, the guys, they're pretty buff. But the women, are they stick thin? No. They've got like dimples on their butts and like thicker thighs, and you're just like, oh, wait, I was born in the wrong time period, right? Okay, so it changes based on the standards within that society and the time period. And remember that ethnocentrism is the viewing of other cultures through the lens of our own culture. So viewing other cultures as different or barbaric or as strange without recognizing the similarities that we share with those same cultures. How many of y'all remember the Nasarema activity that we did at the beginning of the year? The Nasarema Society. Spelled backwards, it's American. It talked about the magical box of medicines, right? The medicine cabinet, the amulets, the ablution room, which was actually just the bathroom, the dentists and the doctors, like these terrible hospitals that people went to die, and they paid a lot of money to get in, and then they paid a lot of money to get out. Okay, viewed through that ethnocentric lens, we're going to view it as strange instead of familiar. So here we have Chinese foot binding dating back to the Tang and the Song dynasty. Well, we also as a culture have restricted women's movement with their feet, with the emphasis on high heels. With body modification that we see in Africa, we see the same thing today with tattoos and even internal piercings and scarification as a form of body modification. Gauges as a form of body modification. So these modifications aren't anything new. You're going to see them across different cultures and across different societies. All right, so now that we've finished talking about attraction, let's talk about love. There are different types of love that have different levels of intimacy and commitment and passion. Fatuous love is the love that is associated mostly with passion. So sexual or romantic feelings, an aroused state of intense positive absorption in another. So this is the honeymoon phase early on in a relationship where y'all are constantly talking to each other or texting, and you're coming up with cute nicknames, and You don't see any red flags because you have on rose-colored glasses, right? You also have companionate love. This is a deep affection for another person, but it doesn't necessarily have to involve sexual or romantic feelings. It can be intimate because you have feelings of closeness and attachment to that person. It can be a form of commitment, like say it's a roommate. Well, if you're rooming with somebody, like say your first college roommate, y'all may have feelings of closeness and attachment, especially if you went to high school together and you're going to the same college together. You may have commitment because you've promised to live in that apartment for 12 months because you've signed a lease. That doesn't necessarily mean that you have passion within that relationship. It's a platonic kind of love. Also, consummate love. Consummate love is the most complete and ideal form of love because it combines all three of these factors. It has intimacy, passion, and commitment. So that's like the true love, the fairy tale love. Here is Steinberg's triangular theory of those three types of love and how they interact. So if you look at the categories, intimacy is just liking. Passion is romantic or sexual affection. And commitment is a promise to stay with that person. So if we look at just liking, this is intimacy alone. So your friend, somebody that you drive to school with, somebody that you sit at lunch with, that's liking. Companionate love is intimacy plus commitment. So this could be your roommate. Maybe you and your best friend get an apartment up in Auburn and you sign a 12-month lease. You're committed to completing the lease and you like each other. Empty love. This is commitment alone. So let's say that a couple's been married for 20 years and the only reason they're not getting divorced is because of the kids. You know, like staying together for the kids. Like, let's get them through high school before we split up because we don't want to have all this like emotional turmoil for them during this point of their life. That would be empty love, just the commitment. Fatuous love is passion plus commitment. So the early stages of a relationship when y'all are official and you upload on Facebook, hey, it's not complicated anymore. Infatuation is passion alone. So you don't have a commitment, so they're just beneficial friends. Romantic love is intimacy plus passion. Okay, so also in a type of relationship there. Consummate love falls in the middle and it hits all three of those categories. Then how do you make a relationship last? Well, number one, you need to have equity. So with equity, this is a condition where you give in a relationship and you also receive in a relationship. You may give different things, but you receive in a same proportion. Okay, so it's not in terms of equality as in everyone receives the exact same thing. Equity is receiving what you need in equal amount. So like, let's say a person in the relationship is the cook. They enjoy cooking, they enjoy making dinner, they enjoy grocery shopping. The other person doesn't. So how do they contribute to the relationship if they're not the ones doing the cooking? Well, what could they do instead that could help out? They could take out the trash after the cooking's done. They could do the dishes after the cooking is done. That is equity. They're not doing the exact same thing. It's not that they're alternating, okay, on Monday, Wednesday, Friday, you cook, and then on Saturday, Sunday, blah, 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 I'll cook. But they are both contributing in equal amounts or proportions to the relationship. So one person may handle finances. The other person may handle childcare. One person may work at a job. Another person may be a stay-at-home parent, something along those lines. So equity in love is important if you want to make sure that the relationship doesn't become codependent and to make sure that it doesn't breed resentment. Because imagine that you're constantly the one giving in the relationship. You're buying all the food, you're buying all the gifts, you're making all the dinners, you're cleaning all the kitchens and bathrooms and taking out the trash. Well, eventually you're going to start getting salty. And you're going to think, why am I putting all of this into this relationship if I'm not getting anything out of it? Another factor that can assist in making love last is self-disclosure. This helps to breed intimacy. So if you are sharing information about yourself, that's not necessarily public information, that mutual exchange can help breed liking between a group because they are disclosing to you or you're disclosing information to them.